3. Pride, awkwardness, and a dangerous accident in Chalisgaon. The year was 1929. The Bombay government had appointed a committee to investigate the grievances of the untouchables. I was appointed a member of the committee. The committee had to tour all over the province to investigate the allegations of injustice, oppression, and tyranny. The committee split up. I and another member were assigned the two districts of Khandesh. My colleague and myself, after finishing our work, parted company. He went to see some Hindu saint. I left by train to go to Bombay. At Chalisgaon, I got down to go to a village on the Dhulia line to investigate a case of social boycott which had been declared by the caste of Hindus against the untouchables of that village. The untouchables of Chalisgaon came to the station and requested me to stay for the night with them. My original plan was to go straight to Bombay after investigating the case of social boycott, but as they were keen, I agreed to stay overnight. I boarded the train for Dhulia to go to the village, went there and informed myself of the situation prevailing in the village, and returned by the next train to Chalisgaon. I found the untouchables of Chalisgaon waiting for me at the station. I was garlanded. The Maharwada, the head the quarters of the untouchables, is about 2 miles from the railway station, and to reach it one has to cross a river on which there is a culvert. There were many horse carriages at the station plying for hire. The Maharwada was also within walking distance from the station. I expected immediately to be taken to the Maharwada, but there was no movement in that direction, and I could not understand why I was kept waiting. After an hour or so, a tonga, one-horse carriage, was brought close to the platform, and I got in. The driver and I were the only two occupants of the tonga. Others went on foot by a shortcut. The tonga had not gone 200 paces when there was almost a collision with a motor car. I was surprised that the driver, who was hired for driving every day, should have been so inexperienced. The accident was averted only because, on the loud shout of the policeman, the driver of the car pulled it back. We somehow came to the culvert on the river. On it there are no walls, as there are on a bridge. There is only a row of stones fixed at a distance of 5 or 10 feet. It is paved with stones. The culvert on the river is at right angles to the road we were coming by. A sharp turn has to be taken to come to the culvert from the road. Near the very first side stone of the culvert, the horse, instead of going straight, took a turn and bolted. The wheel of the tonga struck against the side stone so forcibly that I was bodily lifted up and thrown down on the stone pavement of the culvert, and the horse and the carriage fell down from the culvert into the river. So heavy was the fall that I lay down senseless. The Maharwada is just on the other bank of the river. The men who had come to greet me at the station had reached there ahead of me. I was lifted and taken to the Maharwada amidst the cries and lamentations of the men, women, and children. As a result of this, I received several injuries. My leg was fractured, and I was disabled for several days. I could not understand how all this had happened. The tongas pass and repass the culvert every day, and never has a driver failed to take the tonga safely over the culvert. On inquiry, I was told the real facts. The delay at the railway station was due to the fact that the Tongawalas were not prepared to drive the tonga with a passenger who was an untouchable. It was beneath their dignity. The Mahars could not tolerate that I should walk to their quarters. It was not in keeping with their sense of my dignity. A compromise was therefore arrived at. That compromise was to this effect: the owner of the tonga would give the tonga on hire but not drive. The Mahars may take the tonga, but must find someone to drive it. The Mahars thought this to be a happy solution, but they evidently forgot that the safety of the passenger was more important than the maintenance of his dignity. If they had thought of this, they would have considered whether they could get a driver who could safely conduct me to my destination. As a matter of fact, none of them could drive, because it was not their trade. They therefore asked someone from amongst themselves to drive. The man took the reins in his hand and started, thinking there was nothing in it. But as he got on, he felt his responsibility and became so nervous that he gave up all attempt to control. To save my dignity, the Mahars of Chalisgaon had put my very life in jeopardy. It is then I learnt that a Hindu Tongawala, no better than a menial, has a dignity by which he can look upon himself as a person who is superior to any untouchable, even though he may be a barrister at law. 4. Polluting the water in the fort of Daulatabad. In the year 1935, some of my co-workers in the movement of the depressed classes expressed a desire to go on a sightseeing tour if I agreed to join them. I agreed. It was decided that our plan should at all events include a visit to the Buddhist caves at Virul. It was arranged that I should go to Nasik and the party should join me at Nasik. To go to Virul, we had to go to Aurangabad. Aurangabad is a town in the Mohammedan state of Hyderabad and is included in the dominion of His Exalted Highness the Nizam. On the way to Aurangabad, we had first to pass another town called Daulatabad, which was also in the Hyderabad state. Daulatabad is a historical place and was at one time the capital of a famous Hindu king by name Ramdeo Rai. The fort of Daulatabad is an ancient historical monument, and no tourist while in the vicinity should omit a visit to it. According to our party, had also included it in its program a visit to the fort of Daulatabad. We hired some buses and touring cars. We were about 30 in number. We started from Nasik to Yeola, as Yeola is on the way to Aurangabad. Our tour program had not been announced, and quite deliberately, we wanted to travel incognito in order to avoid difficulties which an untouchable tourist has to face in outlying parts of the country. We had informed our only people at those centers at which we had decided to halt. Accordingly, although on the way we passed many villages in the Nizam state, none of our people had come to meet us. It was naturally different at Daulatabad. There our people had been informed that we were coming. They were waiting for us and had gathered at the entrance to the town. They asked us to get down and have tea and refreshment first, and then go to see the fort. We did not agree to their proposal. We wanted tea very badly, but we wanted sufficient time to see the fort before it was dusk. We therefore left for the fort and told our people that we would take tea on our return. Accordingly, we told our drivers to move on, and within a few minutes we were at the gate of the fort. The month was Ramjan, the month of fast for the Mohammedans. Just outside the gate of the fort there is a small tank of water full to the brim. There is all around a wide stone pavement. Our faces, bodies, and clothes were full of dust gathered in the course of our journey, and we all wished to have a wash. Without much thought, some members of the party washed their faces and their legs on the pavement with the water from the tank. After these ablutions, we went to the gate of the fort. There were armed soldiers inside. They opened the big gates and admitted us into the archway. We had just commenced asking the guard the procedure for obtaining permission to go into the fort. In the meantime, an old Mohammedan with a white flowing beard was coming from behind shouting, "The Deads," meaning untouchables, "have polluted the tank." Soon all the young and old Mohammedans who were near about joined him, and all started abusing us. "The Deads have become arrogant. The Deads have forgotten their religion. That is, to remain low and degraded. The Deads must be taught a lesson." They assumed a most menacing mood. We told them that we were outsiders and did not know the local custom. They turned the fire of their wrath against the local untouchables, who by that time had arrived at the gate. "Why did you not tell these outsiders that this tank could not be used by untouchables?" was the question they kept on asking them. Poor people! They were not there when we entered the tank area. It was really our mistake because we acted without inquiry. The local untouchables protested that it was not their fault. But the Mohammedans were not prepared to listen to my explanation. They kept on abusing them and us. The abuse was so vulgar that it exasperated us. There could easily have been a riot and possibly murders. We had, however, to restrain ourselves. We did not want to be involved in a criminal case which would bring our tour to an abrupt end. One young Muslim in the crowd kept on saying that everyone must conform to his religion, meaning thereby that the untouchables must not take water from a public tank. I had grown quite impatient, and asked him in a somewhat angry tone, "Is that what your religion teaches? Would you prevent an untouchable from taking water from this tank if he becomes a Mohammedan?" These straight questions seemed to have some effect on the Mohammedans. They gave no answer and stood silent. Turning to the guard, I said, again in an angry tone, "Can we get into the fort or not? Tell us. If we can't, we don't want to stop." The guard asked for my name. I wrote it out on a piece of paper. He took it to the superintendent inside and came out. We were told that we could go into the fort, but we could not touch water anywhere in the fort, and an armed soldier was ordered to go with us to see that we did not transgress the order. I gave one instance to show that a person who is an untouchable to a Hindu is also an untouchable to a Parsi. This will show that a person who is an untouchable to a Hindu is also an untouchable to a Mohammedan. 5. A doctor refuses to give proper care and a young woman dies. The next case is equally illuminating. It is a case of an untouchable school teacher in a village in Kathiawar and is reported in the following letter which appeared in the Young India, a journal published by Mr. Gandhi in its issue of 12th December 1929. It expresses the difficulties the writer had experienced in persuading a Hindu doctor to attend to his wife, who had just delivered, and how the wife and child died for want of medical attention. The letter says, quote, "On the 5th of this month a child was born to me. On the 7th, she, the writer's wife, fell ill and suffered from loose stools. Her vitality seemed to ebb away and her chest became inflamed. Her breathing became difficult, and there was acute pain in the ribs. I went to call a doctor, but he said he would not go to the house of a Harijan, nor was he prepared to examine the child. Then I went to the Nagar Seth and Garasiya Darbar and pleaded with them to help me. The Nagar Seth stood shortly to the doctor for paying his fee of 2 rupees. Then the doctor came, but on condition that he would examine them only outside the Harijan colony. I took my wife out of the colony along with her newly born child. Then the doctor gave his thermometer to a Muslim. He gave it to me, and I gave it to my wife, and then returned it by the same process after it had been applied. It was about 8 o'clock in the evening, and the doctor, on looking at the thermometer in the light of a lamp, said that the patient was suffering from pneumonia. Then the doctor went away and sent the medicine. I brought some linseed from the bazaar and used it on the patient. The doctor refused to see her later, although I gave the 2 rupees fee. The disease is dangerous, and God alone will help us. The lamp of my life has died out. She passed away at about 2 o'clock this afternoon. The name of the untouchable school teacher is not given, so also the name of the doctor is not mentioned. This was at the request of the untouchable teacher, who feared reprisals. The facts are indisputable. No explanation is necessary. The doctor, in spite of being educated, refused to apply the thermometer and treat an ailing woman in a critical condition. As a result of his refusal to treat her, the woman died. He felt no qualms of conscience in setting aside the code of conduct which is binding on his profession. The Hindu would prefer to be inhuman rather than touch an untouchable. 6. A young clerk is abused and threatened until he gives up his job. There is one other incident more telling than this. On the 6th of March 1938, a meeting of the Bhangis was held at Kasarwadi behind woolen mills, Dadar, Bombay, under the championship of Mr. Indulal Yadnik. In this meeting, one Bhangi boy narrated his experience in the following terms. Quote, I passed the vernacular final examination in 1933. I have studied English up to the 4th standard. I applied to the school's committee of the Bombay municipality for employment as a teacher, but I failed as there was no vacancy. Then I applied to the backward classes officer Ahmedabad for the job of a Talati village Patwari scribe, and I succeeded. On 19th February 1936, I was appointed a Talati in the office of the Mamlatdar of the Borsad Taluka in the Kheda district. Although my family originally came from Gujarat, I had never been in Gujarat before. This was my first occasion to go there. Similarly, I did not know that untouchability would be observed in government offices. Besides, in my application, the fact of my being a Harijan was mentioned, and so I expected that my colleagues in the office would know beforehand who I was. That being so, I was surprised to find the attitude of the clerk of the Mamlatdar's office when I presented myself to take charge of the post of the Talati. The Karkoon contemptuously asked, "Who are you?" I replied, "Sir, I am a Harijan." He said, "Go away, stand at a distance. How dare you stand so near to me? You are in office. If you were outside, I would have given you 6 kicks. What audacity to come here for service!" Thereafter he asked me to drop on the ground my certificate and the order of appointment as a Talati. He then picked them up. While I was working in the Mamlatdar's office at Borsad, I experienced great difficulty in the matter of getting water for drinking. In the veranda of the office there were kept cans containing drinking water. There was a waterman in charge of these water cans. His duty was to pour out water to clerks in office whenever they needed it. In the absence of the waterman, they could themselves take water out of the cans and drink it. That was impossible in my case. I could not touch the cans, for my touch would pollute the water. I had, therefore, to depend upon the mercy of the waterman. For my use there was kept a small rusty pot. No one would touch it or wash it except myself. It was in this pot that the waterman would dole out water to me, but I could get water only if the waterman was present. This waterman did not like the idea of supplying me with water. Seeing that I was coming for water, he would manage to slip away, with the result that I had to go without water, and the days on which I had no water to drink were by no means few. I had the same difficulties regarding my residence. I was a stranger in Borsag. No caste Hindu would rent a house to me. The untouchables of Borsad were not ready to give me lodgings for the fear of displeasing the Hindus who did not like my attempt to live as a clerk, a station above me. Far greater difficulties were with regard to food. There was no place or person from where I could get my meals. I used to buy bhajas morning and evening, eat them in some solitary place outside the village, and come and sleep at night on the pavement of the verandas of the Mamlatdar's office. In this way I passed 4 days. All this became unbearable to me. Then I went to live at Gentral, my ancestral village. It was 6 miles from Borsad. Every day I had to walk 11 miles. This I did for a month and a half. Thereafter the Mamlatdar sent me to a Talati to learn the work. This Talati was in charge of 3 villages, Jentral, Khapur, and Saijpur. Jentral was his headquarters. I was in Jentral with this Talati for 2 months. He taught me nothing. and I never once entered the village office. The headman of the village was particularly hostile. Once he had said, quote, "Your fellows, your father, your brother are sweepers who sweep the village office, and you want to sit in the office as our equal? Take care, better give up this job." End quote. One day the Talati called me to Saijpur to prepare the population table of the village. From Jentral I went to Saijpur. I found the headman and the Talati in the village office doing some work. I went, stood near the door of the office, and wished them good morning, but they took no notice of me. I stood outside for about 15 minutes. I was already tired of life, and felt enraged at being thus ignored and insulted. I sat down on a chair that was lying there. Seeing me seated on a chair, the headman and the Talati quietly went away without saying anything to me. A short while after, people began to come, and soon a large crowd gathered round me. This crowd was led by the librarian of the village library. I could not understand why an educated person should have led this mob. I subsequently learnt that the chair was his. He started abusing me in the worst terms. Addressing the Ravania village servant, he said, "Who allowed this dirty dog of a Bhangi to sit on the chair?" The Ravania unseated me and took away the chair from me. I sat on the ground. Thereupon the crowd entered the village office and surrounded me. It was a furious crowd, raging with anger, some abusing me, some threatening me to cut to pieces with the darya, a sharp weapon like the sword. I implored them to excuse me and to have mercy upon me. That did not have any effect upon the crowd. I did not know how to save myself, but an idea came to me of writing to the Mamlatdar about the fate that had befallen me, and telling him how to dispose of my body in case I was killed by the crowd. Incidentally, it was my hope that if the crowd came to know that I was practically reporting against them to the Mamlatdars, they might hold their hands. I asked the Ravania to give me a piece of paper, which he did. Then, with my fountain pen, I wrote the following on it in big, bold letters so that everybody could read it. Quote, to the Mamlatdar, Taluka Borsad. Sir, be pleased to accept the humble salutations of Parmar Kalidas Shivram. This is to humbly inform you that the hand of death is falling upon me today. It would not have been so if I had listened to the words of my parents. Be so good as to inform my parents of my death. End quote. The librarian read what I wrote and at once asked me to tear it off, which I did. They showered upon me innumerable insults. You want us to address you as our Talati? You are a Bhangi, and you want to enter the office and sit on the chair? I begged for mercy and promised not to repeat this, and also promised to give up the job. I was kept there till 7 in the evening, when the crowd left. By then the Talati and the Mukhiya had still not come. Therefore I took 15 days' leave and returned to my parents in Bombay. Well, that was the end of Waiting for a Visa by B.R. Ambedkar. Uh, as a quick review, all of these stories are truly heartbreaking. But if I had to choose a few of my favorite moments, it would be the second chapter where he is struggling for accommodation, and the image of Parsis outside the door, uh, ready to beat him up, that really is etched in my mind. And also the fifth one, where the woman dies of neglect, medical neglect by the doctor. I don't think it's easy to forget such stories once you read them. And I'm sure much worse has happened in actuality, and these are just a few things that Ambedkar has heard secondhand or has himself experienced. Very unfortunate, and there are no words to express the heartbreak that the untouchables feel, and we can only sympathize with them and not repeat the mistakes that our ancestors evidently did. That's it. Thank you for listening.